Dear participants, guests, I hope you enjoyed the break and you had a chance to visit the opening of Expo. But now we are coming back here just to continue with our agenda. We now begin with the first panel dedicated to digital skills. I invite Ms. Zoja Kukic and the panelists, Mr. Alexander Riedel, Minister Nenad Popovic, Mr. Neil McLean, Ms. Valentina Taseva, Minister Valdrin Luka, Mr. Srini Gopalan, Mr. Shadi Matar. I hope that you will have fruitful discussion. Let's do the things together. Enjoy.
Nakon srednje škole nisam završio fakultet, a poslednje 4 godine sam radio u magazinu Delova. Na kraju više nisam mogao da se bavim tim poslom. Upisao sam startitov kurs i sada sa par kolega otvaram programersku firmu u Inđiji.
Mislim da ne moraju svi da idu za Novi Sad ili Beograd. Želim da omogućimo ljudima da se edukuju i nađu zaposlenje u svom gradu. Zato smo i otvorili Start centar u Inđiji. Od bivše kladionice smo napravili prostor za učenje i rad.
Mnogo naših prijatelja iselilo se iz zemlje zato što nije moglo da nađe dobar posao, a još više njih planira da uradi isto. Zato smo se mi u Startitu obavezali da do 2020. godine obrazujemo 100.000 mladih ljudi za posao u najzdravijoj domaćoj industriji. Znamo da možemo ovo da postignemo pre svega zahvaljujući IT zajednici, divnim ljudima koji bez nadoknade dele svoja znanja.
Poslovnu karijeru sam započeo na selu kada sam prodavao poljoprivredne proizvode na pijaci i to iskustvo mi je pomoglo u kasnijem razvoju moje firme. Mi se bavimo dizajnom i programiranjem i ponosni smo što nam je jedan od klijenata i kompanija Apple. Podučavam programiranje bez nadoknade zato što volim da pomažem drugim ljudima. Iako se može reći da sam uspešan, ne može meni da bude dobro ako nije i drugima oko mene, a znanje je ključni preduslov za uspeh.
Obrazovanje je najbolja investicija u budućnost. Vizija originala je da podstiče mlade, da ih inspiriše da se pokrenu, da uče, da stvaraju. Mi delimo te vrednosti sa Startitom. Zato smo i odlučili da budemo deo kampanje Znam da možemo. Uzmite budućnost u svoje ruke i kreirajte najoriginalniju verziju sebe, jer znamo da možete.
Nakon 5 godina života u Kaliforniji i rada u Facebooku, odlučio sam da se vratim u Srbiju. Shvatio sam da život u Americi nije baš za mene i da mi srce nije bilo na mestu. Kada sam odlazio IT scenu u Srbiji, skoro da i nije postojala, a jako mi je drago da vidim da je sada situacija mnogo bolja.
Startit i druge organizacije su vredno radile na tome da danas imamo pristup novim saznanjima, upoznavanju novih ljudi i novim prilikama na globalnom tržištu. Bez obzira na to koliko smo svi zajedno postigli do sada, znam da možemo još mnogo više.
Hello. Okay. I'm very honored to host this panel, and this video introduction is basically something that, together with organizers, we thought would be a nice introduction to the topic of digital skills and what it really means. It's just a short segment of what my organization, my nonprofit, is doing in Serbia in this regard. And as am I currently the only representative of the panel from Serbia, that's just, I will not talk about it anymore. But I think it gives us a broad perspective on what are we going to talk. We've heard in the first segment a lot of talk about digital transformation, and it is becoming a buzzword globally, and it's really great that it's becoming a huge topic in our region as well. But why I'm specifically honored to host this panel is that we cannot create digital transformation without digital skills. Therefore, I will try to be brief and actually allow these amazing group of panelists to share their views, especially coming from quite different backgrounds. And I will actually would like to start with you, Mr. McLean, as a consultant currently working on this, especially digital skills segment together with British Council. I thought it would be great if you could actually help us explain what digital skills are and how we can define them.
Okay, that's a challenge, because if I define digital skills today, in 2 years' time, I might need to define some of them slightly differently. Little bit of background, I wrote the first UK national curriculum for IT in 1994. We struggled with this then, and we continue to struggle, but I have written down a list. So
Okay.
I'll give you some sense of digital skills, and people either agree or not. So there's a set of foundational skills, intellectual skills, sometimes called computational thinking, about being able to think about this technology. There's a set of digital literacy and digital citizenship skills. There's the skills that everybody needs to participate in society in a world that's just been changed by technology. There's the skills to develop IT solutions to problems, to be able to take a need that someone else has and work out how technology can solve that need. And increasingly, there's a need for people with the skills to create new digital products, to be programmers, to be the creators of the new digital solutions. If we don't all want to be the companies, the countries, the people that only ever use products created by other people, if we want to get up to the table to do that. And alongside those technical skills, I'd also include things that perhaps aren't traditionally thought of as digital skills. It's the sort of things that the British Council's piloting in its 21st Century Schools programme, which are the skills of collaborating, the skills of working in teams to solve problems, the skills of communicating. So that's a long list. Ask me again in 2 years, and it might have changed because technology changed, but there's my starter.
Okay, it is actually a very, it's a brief list, it's a quite wide list, and it goes into even topics which are far more than just digital segment. But thank you. I think all of those topics will be addressed during this conversation. But Mr. Matar, I would like just go back to you as an advisor in a government in Bosnian Ministry for Communication and Transport. How do you see these definitions that Mr. McLean mentioned, and what do you see, what can government do in order to enhance it, and what are the reasons why we should enhance it?
Well, thanks a lot, Zoya, and let me just build up on what my colleague has said. Yes, the digital skills is a broad issue. A lot of skills that are included under the digital skills. When it comes to the government and its commitment, we saw today that the ministers, the prime ministers actually, and the commissioner of the EU gave their speech of how important it is to network and to have this single, let us say, economy within the region. Talking about that, Bosnia and Herzegovina has made some concrete steps in that regard. We started about thinking how should we approach the real sector, the sector that is most needed when it comes to business, to joining this single market of EU. So we identified that our obligations toward joining the EU, which mainly the Western Balkan countries are doing through this initiative, the digital integration one, is that we need to address the chapter number 10, which is information society and media. And by that, we have identified that we need a new law of electronic communication, and also we need the strategy that will deal with broadband throughput. So Bosnia and Herzegovina is working toward adapting its legislative and laws to have the new electronic communication law. And also we have finished the strategy. The strategy is in its final stage. And probably, hopefully, after finishing the governmental procedure of receiving some opinions from the entities and etc., we might see in the early future the adoption of such strategy on the Council of Ministers of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Great, that sounds very nice, but I think like a lot of us here in the region are used to governments having strategies, but are less used to governments having action plans and concrete actions. So could you follow up on that? Like, what are some of the things that Bosnia is already doing and which is already narrowed through this strategy of yours?
Well, mainly people think that government is responsible about everything, about doing the business or coming to the final stage of finding those people and helping them. Yes, we are. But also the other part has its responsibilities. So we have built something which already most of people know, the public-private partnership, and we delegated some of the responsibilities and some of the tasks to the private sector by means of working closer together, setting some work group together, follow up on their initiatives, supporting their initiatives. So those are things that probably, if the time is allowed after this, let us say, first introduction, I will reflect on that more.
Okay, great, thank you. Ms. Taseva, as I'm very honored to have you here on board, especially as a woman who is an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur in ICT sector. And in that regards, I would really much like for you to talk, to actually explain us. We are talking here about digital skills as Mr. McLean defined it in a quite broad sense. But usually people are also thinking about engineering and programming and specific ICT skills when we talk about digital skills. So can you help us maybe find the connection, and should everybody be a programmer, or should everybody know a little bit programming, or shouldn't? Like, can you help us differentiate and connect those dots?
Thank you very much. To be honest, I'm very pleased to be here today, and I feel very proud as a Macedonian to be part of this panel, part of this great conference. You mentioned that I'm part of ICT. Sometimes it's different for me to answer in which industry am I in ICT or in education, and I'm very glad that I'm part of both. Feeling very nice and very pleased to have the possibility to influence the future of individuals, really to influence the future of individuals and better future through education and on the best industry in the world, ICT, then to influence our companies, through companies and economy, to influence our society. I started in digital literacy, then I went into since I'm more than 20 years into this area, then me and my team, we went into the, let's say, training and education of high-end ICT professions like programmers, lately cloud, right now we are talking about data science and trying to help the economies. But what is the conclusion that let's say in the vision that I saw like 5 years ago? It's not enough. There are we will not have people that will come, that will be ICT programmers. So there is how to say, paradox. From one side, our economy needs more and more ICT skilled people. From the other side, young people, because they are digitally native, because they use Facebook, they communicate on their smartphones, they live online, they stop learning ICT because they think that they know. So from one side, we need bigger gap. From other side, we have a kind of trend that young people think that they know ICT. And this is something that we have to address. Maybe it seems that it's, how to say, when we are talking about VR, when we are talking about the artificial intelligence, we are talking about basic digital literacy. But basic digital literacy is something that we have to start working on, especially in our region, in order to create more skilled programmers and IT professionals that will help our economies further.
Okay, that's a great point. I saw a lot of other panelists nodding, but especially Mr. Gopalan, you were nodding quite a lot. Is that something that you see in terms, especially coming from business sector, from Deutsche Telekom, is that something that you see?
So firstly, thank you for having me here. I thought today the kickoff was really good. I'll come back to your question in a second. I just want to reflect on something fairly fundamental that I think Prime Minister Zaev said this morning. You know, the Western Balkan digitization is really important to us because we are amongst the largest infrastructure builders in this area. And one of our big issues has been the size of levies and taxes and regulatory levies in this area, which holds back our investment. And I thought Prime Minister Jaev said something very fundamental this morning when he said investment can't come from the telcos alone, and he would be prepared to support the telcos and their investment. And from a Deutsche Telekom perspective, I'm happy to commit in the Western Balkans that anything that any government reduces in levies, we will match 1-for-1 in terms of putting that back into investment rather than letting that flow to the bottom line. Because for us, we are investors, we like investor-friendly environments, and if a government is willing to reduce levies, any reduction will flow straight into investment in that infrastructure. That said, on the specific question of skills, look, I'll try and be more specific, and some of the stuff I was nodding to was the need to get more specific on what we mean by digital skills. When I talk to my peers across industries, I think there are 3 skills that most of us are looking for, and there is a big shortage of. One is clearly programming. I mean, that everyone's talked about, software skills. I think a second deeply underrated skill is IT architecture. I think of IT architecture as the people who bridge the generation gap, right? Between some of us who grew up with green screens and, legacy systems, and I work with a lot of governments. So a lot of government systems are still kind of, fairly installed in the 80s, 90s, and the new generation, which is all about apps, right? Now, it's very easy to spend all our time on apps, but the real question is, how do you convert a legacy system into a digital system? And the big skill I find missing quite often is architects who are able to figure out how to make that transition. Because it's not enough to say we want our birth certificates online. We need people who can figure out how to convert the system into enabling that online. So I think IT architecture is a huge area where across industries we have a lack of skill. I think the 2 other areas I'd point out apart from programming and IT architecture are something specific to our industry, which is network engineering. Now, that might sound like, a skill from 20 years ago, but if we have to become digital economies, our networks have to be digital, right? And we need to figure out how to use things like satellites for broadband coverage, right? How to use our mobile networks for broadband coverage, right? How can we get more out of fiber? And we need deeply skilled network engineers to do that. And the last skill, which doesn't sound digital, but I think is fundamental to being digital, is entrepreneurial skills. I think it's what my colleague earlier referred to as also collaboration. But I think the digital world only happens when you're willing to work across functions. I think in most companies, you are still divided as IT and marketing. The reality is the line between them is dying, right? It's product and engineering, right? And so the entrepreneurial ability to work across functional lines, I think, is critical. So for me, those 3 or 4 skills are what I look for when I'm hiring into the organization. And those are 3 or 4 skills that currently I can hire a lot more people than I can find.
Okay, that's actually a good, great point. Those are the people that are needed for the market. And maybe even Mr. Riedel, you can jump in here, because we were just recently also talking about the numbers. What is lacking in the EU in the terms of really technically skilled professionals?
Okay, so I try to give you say, policymakers or public policymakers' perspective here a little bit, because I'm from the European Commission, so it's like, what is the guy doing there on the panel? And actually our role as Commission is also to make sure that Europe is making progress in digital. And so what we do is, of course, we have the digital single market strategy, which is about very much creating the right framework conditions for digital to develop. We have, of course, support for investments in infrastructure and capacity, connectivity, high-performance computing, things like that. And we also do quite a lot in research and innovation funding for digital technology at large. But we can have the best networks, we can have the best funding schemes, we can have the best framework conditions. If we do not have skilled people who can do the work, we do have a problem. And we're looking at the data. My unit is also in charge of something which is called the Digital Economy and Society Index, where we are actually monitoring progress at European level and also at country level. We have basic data also for the Western Balkans. The only thing I can say is the problems are very similar, whether they are in the EU or whether they're in the Western Balkans, and the situation is not good. Well, there was, of course, the question about the definition, whom are we talking about? Because we have different target groups we're talking about. We're talking about the citizens, 500 million people, plus perhaps other people around the EU. We're talking about the labor force, 240 million people, who I think most of which need reskilling and upskilling. And we, of course, as part of the labor force, also the ICT professionals that we also talked about, which makes me also sometimes a bit emotional about the topic, because compared to other areas in digital here, this is about people. And so I'm always talking, of course, here as a representative of the European Commission services, but we all are concerned because it's about people. We all have families, we all have children, we all have parents. We want to have a better future for our kids. I have 2 sons, so we ask ourselves also, how do we prepare our kids for the future? What are the skills that they need, including the skills for the digital transformation? And if I can say, it's not a secret that actually the problems have been very clearly identified. Where we have a lack, where we have a deficit, is just that there's not enough action. So a little less conversation, a little more action, as a famous American singer would have said. And I can perhaps give a few more examples afterwards of what we do in that field.
Perfect, thank you. I just want to point out what you said, is that the problems are fairly similar in EU and here in Western Balkans. But just if you can shortly, are the solutions to those problems, maybe the approaches to find solutions also similar, or should we not do exactly what EU does, or Germany or France? Or?
Well, we are in the digital world, and we're always talking about the digital economy. My unit is called Digital Economy and Skills, but I do not believe that there is a non-digital economy actually in 5 years from now. So I do believe that some of the solutions, of course, are happening or should happen very much at national and at local level, because this complex world, as I said, of digital requires new partnerships. We need really new avenues to overcome what I would call, as an economist, the current coordination problems that we see. We have coordination problems between the universities and the business, so we need more education-business partnerships. We are doing something at European level which is called the Digital Skills and Jobs Coalition, which is something very simple. You would call it a round table. You bring people around the table and say, like, what are the problems? And what can each of us do to overcome that tomorrow, and so that actually some of the gaps that we currently see, more than 350,000 open vacancies for ICT professionals, and only 2 of 3 EU citizens having the right skills for the labor market. How can we do this jointly? Secondly, perhaps the modernization of the education systems, that is also very much something which is happening at national level. There we can bring together people also from the Western Balkans in some of the groups that we have in Brussels, so that they can exchange with the EU member states and look at best practices and so on. And as digital is very disruptive, we also have to look at, say, new approaches, more innovative approaches, and there's something that Commissioner Gabriel already mentioned earlier today, which is EU Code Week. And Code Week is actually really a grassroots movement where all of you can join us. The next Code Week is happening from the 6th to the 21st of October this year, because we see that the teachers and the pupils alone and the school headmasters cannot do it alone. So let's help them with some people who can go to schools and show what you can do with digital technology in a fun and engaging way. Just to cut it short, actually, the challenges are very similar, and I strongly believe that the Western Balkans actually are already part of the solution, and they are involved in our networks.
Perfect, thank you. In terms of solutions and the view actually on the digital skills, Mr. Juka, I would like, as a Minister of Economic Development of Kosovo, it would be very interesting to see how does your ministry and your government looks towards these digital skills, the importance, and maybe even some concrete steps.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Zoya. First, I would like to express congratulations for the host here in Skopje for the first Western Digital Summit. This is a very important move, I think, for the region. And this is a great platform for all of us to share ideas so that we can better integrate the whole system to operate as a region toward the European demands. Because I consider personally that the market decides what skills do we need. Our market mostly is Europe, Western Europe, European countries. And they actually, by developing their digital agenda, it also directs our agenda in terms of what skills we should develop. Because if we want to have a sustainable economic growth, we should have skilled people. And the higher the skills, the longer the growth of the economy will be, the more sustainable the economic growth will be. Because low-skilled laborers can be substituted right away, but high-skilled laborers are the one that investors, foreign investors especially, once they are there, they don't move because it's not easy to switch and change the high-skilled labor force. And this includes, the digital skills includes these categories of skills that we want to develop because it ensures a long-term economic growth for the country, for the whole region in general in this idea. So for us, it's very important to focus on how we can do, what are the tools that we can do to provide the young people with the skills that they need. In Kosovo especially, we have the youngest population in Europe. The average age is about 30 years old. It's more than 70% of the population is younger than 26 years old. While this is an asset for a country, it's also a liability if you don't provide jobs to them. And to provide jobs, you need to provide skills. And that's why we are dealing with several other agendas that we have done. We have made a digital agenda for Kosovo for 5 years, for 7 years in fact, and now soon we're going to review it. We have the national IT strategy, so everything, the whole legislation has been EU compatible, so we have followed all EU directives because it's very important. If EU is your main market, then you have to make sure that you follow their guidelines as well. And thank to all donors, especially European Commission, GIZ, and Norwegians, and Swedish, and USAID, we have been able to integrate the skills and try to spread or train people in different forms, be it through elementary or high schools, through private companies, through government, or through ICT associations in Kosovo. So in general, this would be my conclusion, that we need to focus on developing these skills. There are plenty of programs available, and the more we develop the skills, the longer will be the sustainable economic growth of the country. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Valentina, you wanted to add something to this?
I'd like to comment something. I agree completely with you. Trying to comment that sometimes what I have seen here in the last 5 years, we are trying to start building the building from the fifth floor. So we are not starting from the first floor, we are starting to build the building from the fifth floor. We are going, I agree completely with you that we have to go in the direction of our companies ask us to do, or our, let's say, European market ask us, because we are losing a lot of money. And let me ask the question, do we know how much money we lose because of lack of digital skills? There are data about UK, there are data about Netherlands. Do we have a data about Macedonia or Bosnia or Kosovo, how much money we lose because of the lack of digital skills? And this is a part of the solution to try to provide cloud or infrastructure engineers, but if you want to provide them, you have to train them. And what we do, usually we go to the universities and then we train, let's say, how many people? 1,000, 10,000, is that enough? So one of the solutions, or at least what I have seen in some of European Union countries, for example, Romania, which is very close to us, they went down from universities, so education is the key. They went down from companies to universities to high schools. So there is a huge potential within high schools that can be trained, but once again, if you want to start from the first floor, we have to start with, maybe I will keep saying this because with digital literacy, because we have to train people, we have to train engineers as well, mechanical engineers, we have to train construction engineers, so it's not only to train IT people in digital literacy.
Thank you for stepping in. I think the question how much money are we losing and how much does it cost us not having enough people with digital skills is actually a great introduction to maybe a second segment of this discussion, and that's something that we actually, I would say that even the Western Balkan countries have the numbers of, in terms of the ICT sector is growing in every country in the region. And as an introduction to this story, I would like if we could play just a short video of something that is happening in one of the countries in the region.
Ono što smo htjeli izazvati ove konferencije jeste da podignemo svijest o potencijalima industrije, softverske industrije.
Ovo je industrija koja nudi odgovore na ekonomske probleme u Bosni i Hercegovini, jako brzo zapošljava, vrlo brzo vraća uloženi novac i da je ovo grana u kojoj posla ima za sve one koji se adekvatno obrazuju i pripremaju.
Mi ćemo raditi na usvajanju legislativa, zakona, podzakonskih akata koji će omogućiti ovoj industriji razvoj u najkraćem vremenskom periodu.
Ako bi uspjeli da educiramo ovih 25.000 softverskih inženjera, mi mogli da ostvarimo potencijal ili promet od ove industrije u 2,5 milijarde konvertibilnih maraka, što je 10% našeg BDP-a, recimo.
Mr. Matar, thank you for providing this video as a nice continuation of our talks in terms of digital skills. This was organized by the government. I've heard that another conference on the same topic is happening next month. But can you tell us, like, obviously I think it's common in the region, as I said before, that ICT sector is a huge export sector which is visible in every country in the region and is being recognized by governments more and more. And can you talk more about this? How do you see this potential and where do you see the growth of ICT sector in Bosnia?
Well, thanks a lot. I'm very glad to share those information in this video. Let me answer this question by telling you a small story that did happen during the conference that we had, which is the first conference for software development industry in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We asked one of the engineers, would you leave Bosnia and Herzegovina, go to the west, to Germany, for example, or will you stay in Bosnia and Herzegovina? He said, I had a lot of offers, and I refused all of them. I'm going to stay in Bosnia because my salary is 3 times the average as an entry salary. So this indication is giving us a huge potential of how to keep the youngsters, the young engineers in our country. Why? We have statistics saying that 150 youngsters, or let us say people, who left Bosnia and Herzegovina last year, 20% of them are highly qualified. So the idea is, how should we keep those people? And this is how the government, in cooperation with the BEAT Alliance and with the others, is trying to find ways to draft new curriculum, to work with faculties, to work with NGOs for building a plan, building an approach, how to let people stay in Bosnia. And by the way, working with the IT industry, mainly you can outsource your job, so there's no need sometimes to go abroad. You can work at home, still have the very good salary in Bosnia, in Serbia, in wherever. And we see it as a huge potential. And one of the issues that Bosnia and Herzegovina has a huge potential, information that I shared actually Ms. Valentina with me, Bosnia and Herzegovina had the 9th place when it comes to digital literacy. So our representative through the world, we took the 9th place. We had also an initiative 3 years ago, was called the Hour of Code. Regionally, we were the first one with 263 initiatives. So Bosnia and Herzegovina, when it comes to IT, is excelling, and there is a huge potential. Still, the cooperation of the government, the faculties, and the real sector should be more, let us say, determined.
Okay. Thank you. Now on the government topic, Mr. Juka, I would like to go back while we are at the government representatives here at the panel. So like in terms of this ICT sector and the support of ICT sector, especially you mentioned the high percentage of youth living in Kosovo, and if we don't teach them well, in your case you have much bigger issues if they don't have jobs in the future. So what is, like you've talked about strategy, plans, but what is it that is being done in terms of developing ICT sector in Kosovo?
Yep. Of course, it was very, very right saying that the income, that's very important as well. The same as in Bosnia, I think is everywhere in the region, because it's not only the digital skills, as I said earlier, ensure economic growth, but also the welfare of the people. Because of higher income, they spend more, and the total economy keeps circulating more and more once they have more income. So just to give you an idea, in Kosovo, for example, for the past 3 years, we have seen almost doubling every year of exports of ICT services, mainly targeting German-speaking countries and English-speaking countries as well. So that's very important. Right now, we have more exports of ICT services than export of commodities in Kosovo. So what are we doing? We have now a very important project with World Bank. It's going to start in June this year. It's called Kosovo Digital Economy. This is about $30-something million, about 30 million euros. And the idea of the project is it has three things. First of all, is we want to make sure that we provide people with access to high-quality internet, for example. So this project, the majority of this fund, about 80%, will go toward laying fiber optic cable to the remote areas of Kosovo. Currently, Kosovo has a very good coverage. About 65 to 67% of the territory is covered with fiber optics. But with this project, we will go up to 95%, being the most covered country in Europe with fiber optic cable. This basically ensures that we send high-quality internet to villages, to schools, to libraries, to anybody that needs it. In addition to this, we have 20% of the fund, about 6 million, going to building skills. So the idea is that you provide access to infrastructure, but then you have to provide skills so that they can find jobs either online or through different ways. And once you build these skills, of course, we have had also some tests that we have done with other projects earlier on, which has shown that building skills and then trying to teach them how to sell their own skills can work. We have done a project in 3 municipalities in Kosovo. It's called Women in Online Work, targeting only women. This has been done with USAID, where 400 women were trained with digital skills, web development, app development, different ways. And about half of them found jobs through Freelancer or through Upwork, for example, in 35 different countries around 3 continents. So that's very important to give these skills so they can live on their own. They can create their jobs for their own. So the second component, as I said, first component was infrastructure. The second is skill building, and the third is bringing additional infrastructure and how to create not only skills and jobs online, but also startup businesses, for example. And now one of the components of this project is also developing a tech park in Pristina. The government of Kosovo has built a very big building, about 5,000 square meters, destined for something else. It was used for different things. So it was never used, actually, and we decided to change the destination to create a tech park. This was done jointly with the STIC, with the ICT Association of Kosovo. So basically the government gave the building for 20 years to be used from the ICT Association to create one of the biggest tech parks in the region. Now we are investing with this project around 1.2 million euros to improve the infrastructure inside this tech park, and then GIZ is helping us with furniture and everything else to make it workable. So this tech park is going to have 3 components. First, it's going to have startups. Second is going to have existing companies that want to be close by. And the third wing is going to be R&D centers. For example, right now, I've discussed with Microsoft to create a Microsoft R&D center there. I've discussed with some energy companies to create a renewable energy R&D center. So basically, we don't want to limit the digital skills only to ICT sector. It's going to be energy, because energy right now is very important for all the countries in the region. So the whole infrastructure, I think, will help the young people find a place where they can go and work, or they can find a place where they can start a business, or they can find a place to test their ideas, to do an R&D center and stuff like this. So basically, that's the whole program that we are trying to develop now.
Thank you. It's Mr. Gopalan. I had a question for you, but you can follow up right now, please.
No, so I think this whole area of the role of government policy in creating digital economies I think of it as kind of three phases, right? I think what we spent the first conversation on was very much phase one, which is great quality connectivity, the right digital skills. I think the key constraint in the Balkans, to repeat myself again, is government policy on being clear on whether the infrastructure, especially the telecom infrastructure sector, is there for taxation or is there for development. And so I think that's the first conversation. I think once you have enough infrastructure and skills, the natural next step is to become an outsourcing hub, right? In my home country, India, I've seen that a lot, right? It happens quickly and you become an outsourcing hub. In that phase, the things that attract investors are real estate policy, is energy, it's things like that. It's basic infrastructure for the outsourcing hub. The only danger with that phase is, I agree with you completely, it starts off with much higher salaries, but soon enough, there'll be another country which does the same thing, whose people are cheaper. And that inevitably happens. I think the third phase for me is when there are genuine products being created in that country, where the value add happens in that country. And I think some of the things you were talking about there on creating startup hubs, etc., is really important. But I think there's one missing element there. And if you look at countries like India or Israel, a huge part of that was venture capital, was the ability to attract venture capital. Because, Jeff Bezos didn't become a product manager because he studied product management, right? He became an entrepreneur because there was enough reward in it to become an entrepreneur. And when you look at economies like Israel, for example, or India, what changed these economies from being outsourcing hubs to places where value got added was the arrival of large quantities of venture capital. Because suddenly the question you were asking was, I could make a lot of money as a coder for Microsoft, or I could go build my own app. And in one case, I'm earning a salary. In another case, I'm an equity owner of creating value. So I think the more in this region we can actually start attracting venture capital in as well, to start creating entrepreneurs, not just outsourcers, the more value we will create in these societies.
Okay, thank you. That's a great point, but I somehow see it as a chicken and egg problem. Will venture capitalists come if you don't have skilled startups and vice versa? I mean,
this is why I think of it in phases.
Yes.
I think of phase one being invest in infrastructure, again, things like fiber, right? Invest in infrastructure and skills. That will automatically take you to phase two, where you become an outsourcing hub. Okay. The thing is not to be satisfied with phase two, because when you're in phase two, that's when you can really attract large quantities of venture capital, because they will be seeing that talent. Okay. I mean, we talked about Romania, for example. I think Romania is a great example of where, if I was a venture capitalist, I would seriously look at that as a place I'd invest in. But I think there's also an opportunity for the region of Western Balkans to start positioning itself as a place which has skills and could be a good place to attract capital into, because you'll need that capital.
One short question, if you can be brutally honest with us, is what would you say the Western Balkan countries, in which phase are we? 1, 2, or 3?
So I think it does depend on the country. I think, also I don't think, so for me, there are issues in phase one which need to be solved, which are urgent. And I think until we solve those, we can't move ahead. That said, I don't think these phases are, you know, phase 1 takes 5 years. I've seen countries. I've seen countries move from phase 1 to 3 over a 2-year period because you have the commitment to do that. Right?
Exactly.
Now, it doesn't mean, by the way, that you have 100% digital skills at that point. Right? It means maybe you start at the bottom, but you have enough college graduates coming out that you can start positioning yourself in a certain manner.
Perfect.
Right? I don't think they need to be exclusive.
Thank you. Mr. McLean, this is a very interesting issue. So it's also a big decision. We are now currently seeing ourselves in terms of digital skills, most of the countries, in terms of like having good engineers. That's like a common sense. But when you were actually describing digital skills, you mentioned a lot of those problem solving, then we heard entrepreneurship as one other skill. So in that sense, should we be focused on product building, or and how can we get there? So do you see this line? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd like to just wind back before answering that question, because I just want to pick up something about the phase thing, which I think the important thing is not to build a Gantt chart that says phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and you weren't proposing that. I think the other thing that is really, really important is you don't inadvertently develop short-term strategies to solve your skills gap that actually preclude development in the longer term. And to wear my heart on the sleeve just for a moment, the only long-term solution to skills gaps of any sort is the education system. And that is an absolute role of government. It's a fundamental role of government to ensure that the people coming through the school system have the skills to participate and help grow the economy. And that's why in the UK, you know, we introduced the computing curriculum, and it starts at age 5 and works its way through. Now, we're not going to have 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, whatever, but it does mean we've got a longer-term view on all of this. I think that's absolutely right. I think the other risk about the short-termism is I agreed with all the lists of skills that were identified, but there's some other sorts of things. You know, we talk a lot about data skills in the UK, for instance, you know, shortage of that. There are things round the corner, and we don't know whether they're going to be something or not be something. Machine learning, for instance. So we need an education system that's broad enough to prepare people for everything like that. The other thing, responding specifically to your point, which is it isn't what people know, it's what they can do with what they know. And that's about attitudes as much as skills. And entrepreneurism, I think, is an attitude as much as it is a skill. So part of this is how do we develop attitudes starting in school that are about entrepreneurship, problem solving, working in groups to do real sorts of things. And that's a curriculum issue. It's also a teacher training issue, but it is a curriculum issue. Does the curriculum absolutely promote the idea of young people engaged in collaborative problem solving around authentic problems, real tasks, where they pool their resources to develop real solutions, and they have to deal with difficult things like people, users, some of those sorts of things? Or does the education system purely focus on the technical side with the idea that people will learn to speak human later on when they're employed? And all the employers I talked to, one of the things we did was we set up a degree which is about management skills and IT skills, because what they said was they wanted that blend of people with the technical skills and with the interpersonal skills and the entrepreneurial skills. And if I can give you a real example, a group of 10-year-olds using something, this is again come out of the British Council sort of pilot work around a thing that was developed in the UK called the microbit, which is a very small programmable device, which means you can get groups of 10-year-olds developing products around wearable technology. And they can think of all the issues, you know, how do we solve those issues? What will the users require of that? Alongside the technological issues of how we're going to promote that. So a lot more interdisciplinary problem solving going on in school.
Great, thank you for mentioning that. There is, with microbits, it's getting introduced in the Western Balkan countries. I saw one kid in Serbia playing piano with apples, so an entrepreneurship and some different problem-solving skill. But Ms. Taseva, I would like to follow up on what we just discussed, these phases. I think we can also set it up in terms like in other phases in terms of like if we look at the skills level. So first we need to have like infrastructure and basic digital skills like a hygiene sense. Then we need to have more concrete, stronger tech-skilled people, which are obviously needed for developing bigger solutions and for this digital transformation. But in the end, we also need our products, because it's the issue. If you are becoming an outsourcing destination and a programming farm, it can get you only to some level. Later on, like, what do you think about, since you know the region very well, you travel, and from this business perspective, how do you see this developing, and what do you think could be solutions in terms of that?
I would like to share something that I have seen not only in the Balkans, but also wider. So it's, and going back to the subject of this morning session, digital transformation. So it's not good for us only, I'm starting, because I have this business background, so I'm thinking really in terms of money and time. And we don't have enough time and enough money, so we to spare it like that. So if you are talking about digital transformation, digital is everywhere. Once again, how much money we lose because we cannot order pizza sometimes online, or what are the other perspectives for our business in terms of offering our clients to not only to Macedonia or to the region, so also offering our services, let's say, globally. Why not have the next Alibaba here from Macedonia or Kosovo or Bosnia or anywhere, so in our region? So we are, from my perspective, it's not something that we have to think only about next data scientists or next infrastructure engineers. Believe me, it's very difficult for me to say this, because this is my profession. So from one side, I have ICT background. From other side, this is where my salary comes from. But thinking from the future perspective, we have to provide wider skills in terms of enabling digital transformation. Not to think only about digital literacy, not to think only about high IT professions. We have to think also about people who use ICT or use computers or use applications during their jobs. Once again, like creatives or web designers.
But we heard Mr. Gopalan, for example, say venture capitalists, so investors. What do you think if you had a magic wand and said, okay, this is needed in the region to have next Alibaba and next startups and next product buildings? What should we do?
I will go, from my perspective, I will go big and simple, if it is possible. From one side, we'll ask our governments if they are brave enough to measure the current level of the skills, basic digital skills, meaning even basic digital literacy, for the students and for the teachers. I agree completely that without teachers and an ecosystem, we cannot do anything. And then I will implement the changes within education formal system, once again measuring the results. We have a lot of strategies, we have a lot of action plans without measurements. What I have seen in UK was measuring the top of the island with the bottom. So they are measuring two areas. We are not measuring, I think, I'm eager to listen what European Union have about us. And then I will go, so this is from one end, and from the other end I will go for advanced ICT skills with the donors, like Mr. Valdrin said, and completely agree with that approach. So from two different approaches.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Riedel, I would like to go back to you on this, again, broader view. For EU is definitely in this, also when we are talking about this product building, not just coding, programming, and creating things, but creating in a broader sense. EU is more developed than Western Balkan countries, but is still lagging, for example, compared to US or Israel. So in terms, how do you see the EU development and how do you see Western Balkan countries get, like, what is the difference in terms, how should we address that issue maybe?
It's always very difficult to ask the Commission to make some recommendations because they very quickly call it political. No, but you know, it's about maximizing the potential from going from phase 1 to phase 3, because there is the potential. And that, of course, if I were the kind of master planner for any of the countries in the Western Balkans, what I would do is just look what is available in the countries, what is the current situation, get the data, get the evidence, and then basically try to hack the systems involving all the different actors in the right way. Because I also have to challenge that actually the market alone can solve a lot of the issues. If the market could solve it, we would not be sitting here and talking about things. So at least on the skills supply side, I think there remains quite some long way to go for government working together with all the different actors at the different levels to do something. And there are plenty of best practice examples all over Europe, including also here in the Western Balkans on how to do it. You mentioned the business partnership that you have in Bosnia-Herzegovina. This is not rocket science. It's about just basically saying what is available there and how can we use it and how can all the different actors come together, including the European Commission and also some people who have some money, because you will need some money to make this happen, and just go for it.
Okay, great. So it is in terms of some kind of like cooperation between different stakeholders and pushing through the same agenda, which I would like maybe Mr. Matar for you to comment on that, since you are also, apart from being an advisor to the minister, you are also a professor at computer engineering in Sarajevo. So maybe can you address this, how do these two hats that you are wearing, what are your opinions about that? And especially since you are teaching computer science, basically, in that, and which is very often, those courses are very well connected with the private sector. So if you can showcase one of those examples.
Well, thanks a lot once again. Just let me, I missed one point to say that on 10th of May, Bosnia-Herzegovina will organize the second conference on the development of software industry. And feel free to approach me, so you might get the invitation. It is not a regional conference, it's a conference within Beja, so you are welcome to attend it. The second issue, when it comes me working as a professor at the faculty of the American University of Bosnia-Herzegovina and International University of Bosnia-Herzegovina, it is a bit challenging. When you teach those kids the many skills, that needs an effort and time to teach them, and you see that they would like to become more expert with a lot of skills. Today we are talking about, let us say, IT engineering. What about, let us say, artificial intelligence? What about virtual reality? What about gaming? And many skills that are out there. Other than that, skills, let us say, for using and posting on YouTube and on social media and etc. All of that are tackled, let us say, at the IT faculties. But the bad thing that sometimes we need to talk about and to mention it, the barrier that we have as professors and also as a government, those two hats, to have it in one, is when we see that all the knowledge, all the course that we did implement, they leave Bosnia or they leave the Western Balkan countries to Western Europe. One of the barriers, and to be frankly, maybe it is not so popular to talk about it, but let us open this issue. When one of the Western European countries says, our strategy is to attract the highly skilled people from the Balkans, that is making us actually a huge problem in our country, because we cannot compete with the Western Balkan countries. And still, around an estimate is 100,000 km, let us say around 50,000 euros. We need to invest in those engineers, to finish the faculty and to have the adequate skills to put them in the market. After we do that, you see him or her just leave Bosnia-Herzegovina. So this is an open call. This is a sincere open call for all companies, including your company. As you look at our assets, the broadband, you will invest in our country if you open the broadband. Still, those youngsters are our assets. We would like to see such companies invest in our faculties, not in the government. We're not asking for the government. I want to say if you are taking 50,000 euros from Bosnia as one engineer, we hope to see part of that money is returned through the investment directly in those skills in our region, at least to help us to compete and to be in the game. Other than that, all the skills will be drawn out. And this is why you said that if another country in the near future, they will take those skills. Exactly. And this is what I am afraid of. And being as a professor, I see that we cannot compete with the Western Balkans, especially that one of the ministers who said on the previous conference, our strategy is to attract those skills. One of the skills you said yourself, coming from India to the exactly, this is a good comparison, if you may allow me. So being as a Bosnian, as a patriot, having a lot of initiatives, we have today with us the networks, the NGO, who are putting a lot of effort of building the capacity of skills in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have with us also, and we are glad so, the British Council of Bosnia and Herzegovina with their hugely great impacted digital city project, and probably we'll see it on the second day, the fourth panel, and many others who are willing and trying to see some of the solutions. What will the government, myself, with our team will do to keep the knowledge and skills and to leverage on those knowledge by competing with the global market and with the single European market, which we are till now not part of it. So it's a huge challenge.
Mr. Riedel, you wanted to follow up?
So, because we're always looking at what can we learn from other parts of Europe and what is similar, this is exactly a very, very fundamental point. It should not be a zero-sum game where actually one country is recruiting from another country. We've also seen it in the European Union. Luxembourg is the best example. Luxembourg, until recently, did not have a university and very limited capacity to train the people. What did happen? They absorbed people from Belgium, from Germany, from France, and these people who had been trained in these countries were missing. So we are all in this together, but that also means, and I'm an economist by training, but just I sometimes see what is actually also the stereotypes and the image of the profession and the IT basically faculties. I think we also jointly need to work on the image of the profession and to make it more, make it more sexy, make it more attractive, in particular for girls and women to take up something, because in this region you have quite a good tradition of, the engineering, the kind of hard stuff, hardware and so on. But in the digital world, you also need have sexy products, which means it's about design, it's about fashion, all these kind of things, and that's exactly the things which are also appealing to girls. So we need to work on that a little bit as well.
Mr. Gopal, yeah.
Just to bring together a couple of the thoughts that I think were around. One is this whole idea of, you have to go broad on digital skills, but you also have to start at the top because at least there are some skills there. And second, I think this idea of, how do corporates and governments work together. I'd like to use the example of something that's happening in Skopje. So I think a week ago, we kicked off the digital incubator in Skopje for Makedonsky Telecom. And these graduates effectively now run our entire website and our app. And I visited them, I think just a couple of weeks ago. And there are a few things which are quite interesting, right? Which is, firstly, these are graduates who have some skills in technology, but are now working on a real-life project. And you can see them grow with every day, because they're tackling a real problem rather than a hypothetical problem. Second, I suspect if they weren't working with us here, they would have left at some point. And they would much rather work here and get some of the benefits of that learning. And I think the other thing is they become role models. Because as we're talking about this broadening of digital learning, it's also important to have some role models. I'm sure for these 19, 20-year-olds, they have 6-year-old brothers or sisters who are looking at them and going, wow, this person is doing something cool. Right? So I think this whole idea of how do corporates work with local societies to create some of these incubation opportunities is a big catalyst to this whole process of digital skills.
Thank you. That's actually a very interesting point, saying that digital skills will not only bring us higher employment rates, higher wages, but also will stop the brain drain, which I think is the huge issue here in the region. But when we talk about what I noticed, we really quite a lot talk about informal education and informal initiatives. And what I would like, maybe Mr. McLean, what I would like to hear from you, how can we, all of this that has been discussed so far, implement informal education? How can we bridge the gap between what does the market needs and what we produce?
What you mostly do in the world is disintermediate, don't you? You get the people who have got the demand for skills closer to the people who produce the skills. So you need to bring together the people who need entrepreneurs, the people themselves want to be that, with the education world. And at the moment, often there are structural issues in the way governments are organised that makes that very, very challenging kind of thing. So it's a kind of, over here you've got the demand for what comes through the school and whatever system, and over here you've got the bit that creates it. And structurally, they're completely separate. There isn't any dialogue between it. So the sorts of things that we've tried to do is build more dialogue, get everything from a individual school to a local employer level, right the way up to involving employers in the design of the curriculum. So the working group that I was on for the design of the UK curriculum, there was representation from Microsoft, Google, as well as academics, as well as teachers, and as well as people like me. So but you have to join it at every level.
Of course.
Right down to, say, individual employers, recognising that getting their staff to volunteer to run a code club and support a local school in this kind of thing is long-term in the interests of their company, because it helps develop that member of staff. It helps them with developing their communication skills, their team working skills. You know, if you want, sorry, I'm getting overexcited here. If you really want to give people a very quick taste of what it's like to really run something, put them in charge of a bunch of 10-year-olds. You know, it's a real learning experience, and you can, so that's what I think. It's about breaking down some of those links at every level.
Thank you. When we talk about this, I would like to ask the representative of one government, when we are talking about this partnership and bringing these stakeholders together, especially those who are hiring with those who are educated to get hired, or even better, to create something on their own. Is Kosovo doing something about it, or what is your approach to formal education and bridging the gap?
There are several initiatives. Mainly, I fully agree with Neil that we should focus more on very low grade, like young people, young ages, beginning from 8 years old, for example. There are some initiatives now in Kosovo, for example, and this is a private initiative, which is it makes it even more attractive in creating this maker space for kids from 8 to 16 years old, where they can go there and learn and practice and try to make prototype products, use 3D printers and do programming and see the effects of the programming in an M-robot or something like that, M-bot in this case. So basically that's the most hands-on experience, which the idea is not only to teach them how to do that, but the idea is to foster or to give them the right tools so that they will want to become engineers, computer scientists in the future as well. That's the thing that we need to empower. So we have tried to copy this model, and now we are started already to implement this in high schools. So there is one high school we just inaugurated right now with the help of USAID, which has its own, it's a public school of course, it has its own makerspace inside. So basically young people now can try and do whatever they have their crazy ideas, they can try and make a prototype out of this. In addition to this, there are, for example, you have the ICT Association of Kosovo. They have members, which is ICT companies. They know what are their needs, so they need to be more proactive in working with the universities as well in trying to understand what skills do we need to develop further. And we haven't, I think so far we have failed also in different skills. I mean, it's not only ICT, you know, we have electrical engineers, for example, you know, you have all kinds of professions that we need for the future of the country, and we are lacking this combination of skills and demands for the private sector. But now there have been some movements. The universities, public universities, have created some boards from private companies, and the boards will advise in the curricula of the university of what kind of subjects we need to focus on, what skills do we need to build for the future. In addition of all this, because now universities are also challenged with the lack of number of applications or applicants to study a specific degree. And this is another serious problem. And what other countries have done, and I've looked at Ireland's model. Ireland, for example, has promoted the idea of the digital skills or ICT sector or computer scientists or engineers in general, that this is the future of the country and we want to focus there. All the budget is focusing there. So they have done marketing targeting mothers, for example, to convince their children to go to a computer science education or school. So, and now today, this has been like a 10-year-long promotion activities, and today, now in Ireland, you have Microsoft, you have Google, Facebook, because there are skills there. It's not only, of course, the business environment is very important, but once you have skills, the others are secondary, I think.
And I will also use this opportunity to excuse you, because I know you have a meeting with Commissioner Gabriel. So, and we will just stay for a couple of minutes just to wrap this discussion up. Thank you, and one round of applause for the Minister who will come. I think some of you also returned to me when he mentioned this combination of skills. And I think it is something that is actually maybe not said, but I think all of you were thinking about it, that it's digital skills. You need not just to have digital skills and then you are a digital expert, but it needs to combine with some other professions and other skills. And this is this interdisciplinary approach. And in that regard, like Ms. Tasev, I would also like to hear from you and to hear from all of you actually to think about some concrete examples on how we can maybe improve, and have you heard of some other countries improving their formal education systems, but like short tricks which brought us closer to something, or you have some suggestion of the sort?
Okay. Together with going a little bit back with connecting with the subject related with formal education, teachers is something that we almost didn't mention during our discussion, and I think it's something that we should address strongly, starting from once again, I would like to measure, so starting once again with measurement or assessment of the current level of digital skills. Not only Word, Excel, or PowerPoint, but also, let's say, a little bit more advanced knowledge and skills. And then also I'd like to address one more subject, which is NQF, which is National Qualification Framework. As I know, there are a lot of professions. For example, I know the countries in the region that do not have the profession of web designer. There is no such a profession within formal education system. So this is something that we have to do also very soon. This is why I mentioned big and simple. So to look into the professions that are already present there. So there is no profession, web designers, and we are talking about data scientists. This is something that we should address from both sides, like I said. Going back to your question about examples and thinking about the time that we have or don't have, one of the examples is Romania. They introduce certification, and I'm a huge fan of certification as a tool for a measurement of the growth and increase. Certification, they included industry-recognized certification within the national Matura examination. I think that Matura is the word that is more or less known to all of us. So if they influence the high school students, they influence the economy, they influence the number of the people that will work in the ICT. So not to ask mothers, but to ask students to have at least one exam or certificate, and then after that they can work anywhere as a technicians even. Romania went into the direction, Poland is the next one, Greece is also there, Austria is accepting that model. This is what I know. Few examples.
Great. Do you have some of other examples of what could be done in terms of formal education and bridging this gap? Mr. Riedel?
Again, we have plenty of reports where you say what kind of reforms have been made by various member states. There are really some member states who are doing great stuff and who are very courageous in looking at their curricula, looking at teacher training, in basically raising the salaries, the framework conditions, making schools more digital and so on. So there's plenty of stuff around Europe. What I wanted to say is that if member states are taking these things not seriously, there's a risk that not only they do not have the skilled population and labor force that they need for the future, but that some of these things are taken over by purely private actors. And of course, this is then also only affordable to part of the situation, of the population. I mean, the coding clubs for the younger people. Coding clubs for the younger people, it's basically kids of relatively aware and wealthy parents who are attending. If we really want to make a dent, we really need to have this transformation happening also in the digital education, in the national public education systems. So it's a challenge, and these basically new models are sometimes good, but sometimes they're also challenging because at the end of the day, there's a bit of a social injustice problem. And so, I mean, but again, Europe only has limited things to say here. It's really up to the member states. But please, those member states who have not yet woken up to the challenge, please wake up. Okay,
I agree. That's a very good point. That the formal institutions and the government should take, especially in terms of bringing diversity and educating everybody equally. Also, the issue of boys and girls and getting them into ICTs more often, and that's something that really governments need to tackle. Maybe I can also offer one of the examples from Serbia. Is from the last year, Serbia has coding in primary schools as a subject, and it was actually implemented with the support of a private non-profit. So in that sense, that can also, it's a sort of a public-private partnership, but basically that's also something that can be done if there are good non-profits who are willing to get in this ring, and I'm sure they are, and the British Council, GIZ, and all the institutions mentioned here before already know them. I would like to wrap up if nobody has something to add on, and I would like to thank you for the attention and to try and get some main conclusions out of this very broad discussion. As you can see, digital skills, it's a big topic, but it's also a very important one. And if there is something with what I think you should leave out of this room after this session, okay, is what we talked about, that there are three phases of the development. One is this basic infrastructure and general and basic skills level, which we need to address. The next phase is this big tech, ICT, specific tech and ICT skills which are needed, which we talked about. I think the amount of skilled professionals in Europe is around 350,000, so it's huge, and it's a general problem everywhere. 8 million, okay, even more. And then in the end comes this product building and startup building, and these are not phases. One, you need to reach and get to the one fully to start building the second and third, but they are all important to have in mind, and to have the third one as our goal, and to see how we can get fastest to this third stage. Another thing is that digital skills are not something that is relevant only to the ICT sector and digital sector. It's something that's going to be relevant for everyone. And that it's not going to solve just employment issues and higher rates issues, but it will solve the brain drain problem. And in the end, how to approach it, one of the advices that came from the panelists were think big and simple. So like try to keep it simple. And one other thing that we heard quite often is get the right data and act upon those data. I would like to thank panelists, all of you. Thank you for the great insights, for keeping it short, allowing us actually to have a discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you for staying, and I hope this was useful, and hope to see you during the next events and next sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoya. Thank you to the all panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite you for a lunch break in the hall 3. We'll see each other again at 3:30 here on the next session. Thank you.